Nope, stupid.
It is happening again. There's a nice, consistent blue color palette this time. The 2005 Rian Johnson directorial debut film Brick is like a brick, in that it may not be pretty, but it provides a solid foundation to build some pretty cool stuff on top of it. I've just lied to you to make that brick metaphor work, and much worse, well, I wrote like a bit about how I was gonna say, oh, I wish I had a brick for this. So it's dumb. Brick is a great movie. Written, directed, and edited by Rian Johnson and starring a 2005 variant of Joseph Gordon-Levitt. I think, well, to be frank, Brick is one of the coolest films ever made. Rian Johnson is personally one of my favorite filmmakers, and I'm sure he needs no introduction. You know, The Last Jedi and Knives Out were huge in their own ways, and Looper. I know most people have seen Looper, but I'm giving it special mention here because it's underrated as hell. Hell is where you're going if you don't like Looper. Thank God I didn't write that down. Anyways, in those three movies, which are his most recent films, there's a clear connective tissue between them. He approaches theme and character arcs in a very specific way, and more relevant to this video, genre. Genre and genre aesthetics and tropes is always a major facet of his films, and that's in how he remixes and plays with the audience's knowledge of and attachment to the given genre, usually done in a way that makes the film look and feel unique. More importantly, usually in a way that's directly relevant to a character's arc or a thematic statement, which can lead to a tricky balancing act, and I guess that's why most of his films only focus on one central character. Last Jedi stands as the most ambitious in this category for how sprawling it is and how many threads need to be balanced, and for how it's dealing with a specific franchise and its own canon, rather than a broader genre through an isolated lens. Whether or not he succeeded on that film depends on who you ask. I bring all this up to establish how he approaches these later films. His most recent film, Knives Out, stands as a particularly airtight example of this style, where most of the main character's development stems from and derives from the narrative relationship to the genre, as well as the audience expectations for it. And that's why I've never liked boiling down a style to just subverting expectations, because it's really just a facet in a larger story. The subversion itself is almost never the point. I'm getting sidetracked. I'm a big fan of Brick. What makes this movie so cool? Well, I'm not sure how broad its appeal is. I've seen it described as a filmmaker's film, which isn't entirely unfair, and I wouldn't even really take it as a detraction to it. I think it operates in a very specific and niche style and tone, something that's almost entirely unique to itself. It blends classic noir detective stories with a high school setting and dashes of anime stylization. And by dashes, I mean heaping tablespoons. Brick is an independent directorial debut. I want to firmly establish that. There's almost always an inherent awkwardness to a director's first attempt to make something seriously dramatic. Knowing the type of stories you love and want to create, but where you are, you're usually punching up. There's usually a lack of experience and knowledge to create something sincerely dramatic. It's that film student vibe where it's trying to be super serious, but the amateur production or age of the actors just makes it come off as weak or pretentious. Filmmakers aware of this usually try to lampshade it with self-awareness or winks at the audience or whatever saves a little embarrassment. With Brick, however, Rian Johnson made the decision to turn around and run as far in the opposite direction as possible. Everything in this movie is played so straight and confidently, and not even in like a tiring, self-important way either. Characters talk in this exaggerated, pulpish way. There's nothing traditionally naturalistic about this movie.
Throwing at me if you want, hash that. I got all 5 senses, and I slept last night. That puts me 6 up on the lot of you.
It's easy, bro.
But it sells its world so thoroughly that it still feels true. And that plays into something I admire about Rian Johnson's films in general, in that he never really worries about how the audience is swallowing the logic or believability of his story. He builds it to where he thinks he needs to be, and if you're into it, great. If not, then it's just not for you. And that can limit his appeal to some people, which it does, but I think films constantly trying to justify themselves to the audience is one of the most exhausting things that you see a lot. Anyways, Brick is much different to his later films in that it leans far heavier on mood rather than clearly defined character arcs or broader thematic statements. I mentioned earlier how straight and confidently the story is played, and while that's a great quality to have in a movie, it can't carry the whole movie, but it's backed up by genuinely effective and thoughtful execution. Noir movies carry those harsh shadows, walking down the streets in a trench coat in the rain, moody stuff. Brick creates its own tonal identity by creating this mood of reflective melancholy. I said before how these are basically high school students who talk like, well, this. That is goofy on its own, but it meshes into the tone created to support it so well. Most of the movie is shot in this hazy blue look. There's a very dreamy quality to it. Stylized camera movements and edits are employed to accent or exaggerate a moment of action like a punch, or a fixation on an object like a ceiling fan. Watching the movie, you can feel the constant pulling of its influences. It takes a bit of everything creatively relevant and then fires on all cylinders. The confidence and calculation provides a film with incredible execution that is needed to give specific moments an extra punch to really sell the film. The stylization jumps out when it needs to give us great moments like this fight. There's this great recurring use of passing cars used as a sound effect for a punch. It's great. The use of wide shots is absolutely gorgeous and gives the film the extra breathing room and contemplation that it needs. The sets and locations of the movie are captured in a way that plays into this mundane, dreamy feeling. And I have to mention the score by Rian Johnson too. It really does take the movie to a whole nother level. The recurring use of Emily's theme captures the soul of the movie so immaculately. It's one of my favorite film scores. The cast is fantastic too. All of them just naturally spit out this dialogue and it's great. Joseph Gordon-Levitt is of course the standout. Put him in Knives Out 3, come on. Give Knives Out 3 a Rian Johnson universe Portals moment. I hope I didn't give too much away about this movie, but if you haven't seen it, I hope I sold it. Brick is just one of those movies that provides such an endless source of inspiration to pull from, as well as just being the type of movie that I'm really into. Rian Johnson has gone on to accomplish so much, both artistically and commercially, but I think Brick still holds such a strong spot in his filmography. He can put out 20 masterpieces, and I don't think Brick will ever feel like the early one. It's one of the most singular and uniquely holistic movies I've ever seen, and it's so fun to revisit once you've seen it. And even if it turns out not to be your cup of tea, I think you can learn a lot about indie filmmaking from this movie, and how much uniqueness can be created through smart directing and writing, with elements that are pretty basic on a surface level. Yeah, that's the video. I don't know how long it was. I enjoyed writing it a lot. I know this type of video is super niche, but I like making them, and if this gets at least one person to watch Brick, then we won. Another conversion for the cult of Rian Johnson. Yes, watch Rian Johnson films. Yes, watch more Rian Johnson films. Subscribe to Damien on Films. Just keep watching, because one day we're gonna talk about this. That's actually a lie. I'm not doing a Last Jedi one.